You know what's worse than betrayal? It's not the act itself. It's when the person who claims to love you looks you in the eye and lies, convincing you that you're safe, when in reality they're already gone. That's what happened to Alina. And the irony, her husband didn't even realize she had already walked away from his life, while he was busy in the arms of another. Alina had always been the kind of woman who believed in building, not tearing down. From the very first day of her marriage to Saad, she poured every ounce of herself into making their home more than just four walls. It was warmth, it was safety, it was love in the little things. She wasn't the wife who demanded diamonds or lavish holidays. Instead, she believed in the quiet, ordinary gestures that made life meaningful. She would rise early to iron his shirts, carefully pressing out every wrinkle so he'd look impeccable at work. She remembered how he liked his coffee, strong, no sugar, just a hint of cream, and she would place it by his side while he scrolled through emails in the morning. When he returned late at night, she would be waiting, a soft smile on her lips, sometimes even fighting sleep just to greet him with warmth. She thought these things mattered. She thought they were noticed. But love, she would come to learn, cannot survive on one person's effort. It takes two hands to hold a bond together. And in her marriage, only one hand was trying. At first, she dismissed the little cracks, the unanswered texts, the way he avoided her eyes when she asked about his long hours at work, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't hers lingering on his shirt. She tried to believe in him, tried to silence the gnawing doubts that ate at her in the quiet hours of the night. She told herself, he's just stressed. He's working so hard for us. She wanted to be the supportive wife, the patient partner who didn't jump to conclusions. But silence doesn't heal wounds, it deepens them. One night, as they lay side by side in bed, Alina turned to him, her voice almost breaking as she asked, "Saad, are you happy with me?" Her heart raced in her chest, desperate for an honest answer, desperate to feel reassured that the distance she felt was only in her imagination. Saad barely looked up from his phone. He leaned over, pressed a distracted kiss to her forehead, and murmured, "Don't overthink, Alina. You always imagine things." Then he rolled over, leaving her staring into the dark. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay there in the silence, eyes wide open, realizing that the man beside her, the man who once made her laugh until her cheeks ached, was now a stranger. And perhaps worse than a stranger. A stranger does not owe you their loyalty. A husband does. The unraveling came not with a fight, not with screaming accusations, but with a moment of clarity so sharp it cut her open. One evening, Saad forgot his laptop bag at home. She, ever attentive, decided to take it to his office. She thought he would be grateful, thought perhaps she'd surprise him, remind him that she was still there, still waiting. She reached his building, walked down the hall, and stopped at his office door. The blinds weren't drawn. That's when she saw it. Saad wasn't alone. His secretary, a young woman with painted nails and a skirt far too short, was in his arms. His lips were pressed against hers with hunger, his hands tracing her back with a familiarity that was supposed to belong only to a wife. Alina froze. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. The air left her lungs. Her hand trembled, the laptop bag slipping from her grasp and hitting the carpeted floor with a muffled thud. Neither of them noticed. They were too lost in each other, too wrapped up in the thrill of forbidden passion. And in that moment, Alina realized what she had become, an afterthought. A ghost in her own marriage. She didn't scream. She didn't storm inside and slap him across the face like the movies often show. She didn't break down in tears right there in the hallway. No, she simply turned, walked away quietly, and carried the image deep inside her chest, like a blade that pierced but also awakened. That night, she didn't cry. She sat at their dining table, staring at the surface where countless dinners had been shared, countless conversations had unfolded. And she realized those memories meant nothing if she was the only one who had been holding on. Slowly, she pulled open a drawer and retrieved the divorce papers she had drafted months ago when suspicion first gnawed at her heart. She had kept them hidden, almost ashamed of her own foresight. But now, with her hands steady, she picked up a pen and began to sign. Each stroke of ink across the paper felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Her dignity, her strength, her freedom. She didn't think of revenge. She didn't think of making him suffer. She thought only of herself. For once in her marriage, she thought of what she needed. And what she needed was to be free of the chains of lies. When the final page was signed, she slipped off her wedding ring. She stared at it for a long time, remembering the day he slid it onto her finger, his eyes shining with promises he had broken too easily. She placed it on top of the papers, a quiet symbol of an ending. Then she packed, not frantically, but deliberately. A small suitcase was enough. She didn't need much, just her favorite books, her sketchpad, the necklace her late mother had given her, a few clothes. She wasn't running away in fear. She was walking away in strength. When the clock struck midnight, Alina zipped her suitcase, slipped on her coat, and looked around the house one last time. The home she had poured her love into now felt like a stranger's place, hollow and cold. She turned off the lights and walked out, closing the door gently behind her, as if to say, goodbye. Hours later, Saad stumbled into the house, reeking of alcohol and cheap perfume. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled. He didn't notice the papers on the table. He didn't notice the missing suitcase. He barely noticed anything at all as he collapsed into bed, assuming Alina was asleep in the other room. And that's the cruelest irony of all. While he was tangled in the arms of another woman, his marriage had already ended. While he slept, oblivious, Alina was gone. She had chosen herself. By the time dawn broke, and sunlight streamed into the house, there was no trace of her warmth left. Only silence, only emptiness, and on the table, waiting like a quiet bomb, were the divorce papers, signed and sealed, topped with a ring that no longer belonged to him. But Saad wouldn't realize what he had lost, not yet. Not until it was too late. People think the cruelest punishment is revenge. But the truth, it's indifference. To erase someone so completely from your world that their betrayal no longer has the power to wound you, that's the kind of ending no apology, no pleading, no regret can undo. That's what Alina chose. And that's what left Saad gasping in a silence louder than any screaming match could have been. The morning after she left, Saad stirred awake lazily, his head heavy from drink, his body sluggish. He reached for his phone, muttering irritably when he couldn't find it on the nightstand. Alina, did you see my... He stopped mid-sentence, frowning at the empty space beside him. It wasn't unusual for her to rise early. He thought she might be in the kitchen, probably humming softly as she brewed his coffee. He pulled himself out of bed, dragging his feet toward the dining table, expecting to see breakfast. Instead, his eyes landed on a stack of papers. Neat, cold, final. He blinked, confusion settling in as he picked them up. Divorce. His name on the dotted lines. Her signature carved into every page like a scar. And there, glinting in the faint morning light, was her wedding ring. For a moment, he chuckled nervously, shaking his head. She's dramatic, he muttered, half convincing himself. She'll be back once she cools off. He set the papers down and went about his morning as though nothing had happened. But when he called her phone, it went straight to voicemail. When he checked her closet, half her belongings were gone. And when he opened the fridge, he noticed how bare it felt without the little containers of food she always kept for him. Still, denial was stronger than reality. He went to work, brushing off the unease. He told himself she'd return. That she always forgave. That she always stayed. But this time, she didn't. Days turned into weeks. Every night he came home to silence. No clatter of dishes, no faint jasmine candles burning, no voice asking him how his day had been. The secretary he once clung to lost her appeal quickly. The thrill of secrecy evaporated when there was no longer a marriage to betray. Their conversations were shallow, her laughter hollow. He began to see her not as an escape, but as a mirror reflecting his emptiness. At first, he tried to call Alina repeatedly, leaving messages that shifted from casual to frustrated, then desperate. Alina, stop this nonsense. You know we can work it out. Another day. You're blowing this out of proportion. Come home. And later, his voice breaking. Please, just, let's talk. I can't do this without you. But her phone remained silent. She had blocked him, erased him, chosen peace over chaos. Meanwhile, Alina was slowly reclaiming her life. The small studio apartment she rented wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. 4 walls that echoed with her laughter, her music, her freedom. For the first time in years, she could eat cereal for dinner if she wanted, stay up sketching until dawn without worrying about disturbing anyone. She spread her old design portfolios across the floor, dusting off her dreams. It had been years since she worked on projects, but talent doesn't vanish, it waits. She sent out proposals, emailed old contacts, and within months, she landed her first big client. The spark returned to her eyes, the confidence back in her voice. She wasn't just surviving, she was building. Her days filled with color again. She met new people, colleagues who admired her creativity and resilience. They invited her to art shows, to coffee meetups, to spaces where she could breathe without feeling like she was shrinking to fit someone else's shadow. The scars of betrayal didn't vanish overnight, but instead of hiding them, she carried them openly. They weren't weaknesses, they were proof of her strength. Saad, on the other hand, was unraveling. His house became colder, emptier, a museum of absence. He noticed how lonely dinners felt without her quiet presence across the table. He realized how much he had taken for granted, the way she always remembered his appointments, the way she laughed at his dry humor, the way she listened even when he rambled about things that bored her. He hadn't noticed when she was there, but he felt her absence like a punch to the gut. The secretary eventually drifted away, uninterested in a man weighed down by regret. His friends didn't linger long either. Pity is not a foundation for companionship. The turning point came at a corporate event months later. Saad was there in his sharp suit, glass of whiskey in hand, plastering on the smile he had mastered. But when he heard laughter across the hall, his chest tightened. He turned, and froze. Alina. She stood near the stage, elegant in a navy dress that framed her like royalty. Her hair was swept back, her eyes alive with passion as she explained her design concepts to a group of executives. Her gestures were animated, her confidence magnetic. And beside her stood a man, not touching her possessively, but close enough, his posture protective, respectful, his attention wholly on her. The man laughed at something she said, his admiration written in the softness of his gaze. Saad felt the ground tilt beneath him. He couldn't look away. He had expected her to be broken, bitter, clinging to the shards of their failed marriage. Instead, she was radiant, thriving, untouchable. His pride cracked, jealousy clawed at him, but beneath it all was something deeper, regret so sharp it nearly doubled him over. Summoning courage, he approached her after the event. Alina, he said, his voice low, uncertain. She turned, meeting his eyes. Her expression was calm, steady. No anger, no longing, just peace, that cut deeper than any scolding words could have. Saad, she acknowledged softly, her tone polite but distant, as though addressing a colleague rather than a man she had once loved. Can we talk? He asked, desperation leaking into his voice. He searched her face for a trace of the woman who once clung to him, who once forgave his every mistake. But she was gone, not physically, she was right there, but the version of her who belonged to him no longer existed. There's nothing left to talk about, she replied. Her words weren't sharp, weren't laced with venom. They were final, delivered with the kind of serenity that comes from healing. That was what shattered him. Not her anger, not her tears, her peace. She turned back toward the man beside her, her smile genuine as they resumed their conversation. Saad stood there for a moment, drowning in silence, realizing he no longer had a place in her story. He had gambled their marriage for fleeting temptation, and he had lost, not just her, but himself. That night, he returned to his empty house and finally broke. He wept, not because she left, but because she had moved on, built a life without him, and no longer needed his existence to define her. His punishment was not her absence, it was her happiness without him. Alina, meanwhile, walked out of the event with her head held high, her hand loosely intertwined with that of the man who had patiently waited to know her. She wasn't rushing into love, she wasn't desperate to fill a void. She was simply living, free, unbroken, unapologetic. And as the city lights glowed above her, she smiled at the thought of her journey. She had loved, she had lost, but most importantly, she had found herself. And that's the message her story carries. Sometimes, strength is not in fighting for someone who doesn't value you. Strength is in walking away, quietly, with your dignity intact. Because the loudest revenge is not anger, it is a life rebuilt, brighter and stronger than ever before. Sometimes, strength is not in fighting for someone who doesn't value you. Strength is in walking away, quietly, with your dignity intact. Because the loudest revenge is a life rebuilt, happier and stronger than before.